group of students from Hawaii Pacific University can now call themselves authors. A cohort of 11 first-year doctorate students co-authored a new textbook on mental health practice here in Hawaii. And joining us now is HPU adjunct professor Marta Garnett, along with two of the student co-authors, Jill Christensen and Tori Gutierrez. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, and thank you for having us.
Of course. And Marta, let's start with you. Why was this book needed?
Well, there are a lot of textbooks on the topic of evidence-based mental health practice, but none of the books that were on the market really addressed the unique and special cultural factors that would help someone to practice more effectively here in Hawaii.
And, let's talk about some of these case studies. You actually went out there to see what specifically makes Hawaii situations different from, say, the continent. What have you learned in this process, Jill?
Yeah, the textbook covers such a wide variety of topics. We cover everything from depression, anxiety, trauma, but the whole focus really is based on mental health in Hawaii. So we did a lot of research on what that looks like, and we really wanted to make the book specific for Hawaii and cover the mental health issues that are happening here.
Was there one study in particular that struck you or that kind of reflects the differences that we see here?
I think the chapter that I wrote, I studied parent-child relationships, and I think the biggest thing that me and my research partner found was that the cultural aspects just played a larger role, and that it's really important to keep that in mind when treating your patients.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Tori? Tell us about your experience and what you learned in this process.
Sure. I was giving an interview the other day, actually, and I gave this example of, maybe when you're working with someone on the mainland, if they're having, interpersonal conflict in family that seems, maladaptive, a therapist might say, maybe you need some space from your family, maybe you need to distance yourself. But here, I would say I would almost never recommend that, as ohana and family is such a huge component of culture here. And so just kind of catering your advice and keeping that therapeutic relationship intact by, giving solutions and talking with people in a way that, they will understand and also see in their life, those solutions in their life.
Mm-hmm. And this is really important to train the next generation, right, Marta, about, the differences in culture and culture-informed treatments. Tell us about that part.
Absolutely. And so we will actually be using the textbook that this cohort wrote with the cohort that starts in the fall, and they will use it as a textbook. And I just wanted to say that all of the profits, everyone that was involved in this exercise volunteered their time and energy, including the proofreaders and the other two editors that I engaged with. And all of the profits from any sales from the textbook will go to the psychology program at Hawaii Pacific University.
Great. Is there somewhere we can find this textbook or support in any way?
Sure. Right now it's available on bookbaby.com, and after next week it will also be available on amazon.com.
Perfect. Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate the good work. We are in a shortage of clinical psychologists, so definitely need all of the expertise that you're showing. Thanks for joining us this morning.